Hey guys, welcome to Calling Home. Family can be really weird, and we hope that this channel is super helpful to you. So, I just finished watching the show Shrinking on Apple TV, and rarely do I find a show that captures just how difficult and nuanced adult relationships can be between parents and their children. And this show, I think, does such a great job of it. Let me get rid of this hair tie that I wanted to create a video where I'm going to break down the different relationships and some of the different patterns, nuances, things that I see. So if you haven't watched this show yet, go watch it before you watch this video because it's going to be full of spoilers. I'm going to give you some of my thoughts about these relationships, what I think about them, what I would recommend, and we'll get like a good sense and a good profile for how each of these relationships function and what it might mean for you and your adult child or your relationship with your parent as an adult. So there's a couple of different like parent-child dynamics happening in the show. The first one is of course between Jimmy and Alice. Jimmy is like the main character of the show. He is a therapist. His wife passed away and he was left, being a single solo parent of a teenage daughter who is an only child. And the show really walks you through his ups and downs as a parent. And I found this to be so fascinating because me as a therapist, right? And he knows all the things he's supposed to be doing. He knows what's right, what's wrong, what's helpful, what's not helpful, and he's still like really messing up in so many ways. I mean, the guy is forgetful. He really completely emotionally abandons his daughter. He at sometimes physically abandons her. He's bringing like women into the home late at night. He's using substances. There's so many examples here of how Jimmy is really letting down his daughter during this moment where she's also lost her mother and is grieving. And I think it's a great example about how any of us can fall into these patterns of emotional neglect, emotional abandonment, physical neglect, physical abandonment when we are pushed to the brink of what we can tolerate, and also how much we need to rely on community and other types of support in those moments. And that's something that Jimmy really struggles with, right? And we see this theme come up time and time again throughout the show that he wants to help other people, but he doesn't necessarily want anyone to help him. And there's a little bit of this dynamic going on, I think, of like him not necessarily wanting to feel better because that would mean moving on from his wife's death, or not missing her would mean giving up on her and moving forward. And anyone that has gone through significant loss or grief in their life, I'm sure you can relate to that. But while Jimmy is floundering in his own grief, his daughter is really being left to find her own external support, which she finds in a neighbor who is another parent that we're going to talk about later in this video. But she then is like, okay, I can't count on my dad. He's not going to be there. And so I have to go and find my own support and find my own way. And in a lot of ways, I think this forces Alice to grow up, to become more mature, to become more independent. But it also really strains her relationship with her father. And I wanted to talk about this example first because this is a prime example of like those really important years when a child is an older teenager and they're about to transition out of the house. I think in the show in season 2, Alice is like 16, 17 years old. She's getting a car. And this is a key moment that is likely going to dictate how their relationship goes in adulthood. Certainly in those early adulthood years, a lot of it is going to depend on how her father shows up now. And one of the key parts about Jimmy's relationship with his daughter Alice that I want to highlight here is the apology, the recognition of wrongdoing, and the repair that happens. So there is a scene in the early episodes of the show where Jimmy kind of has a breakdown and he's not showing up great as a father. He knows that he's not showing up well. He's telling other people, like, I messed up. I am embarrassed for how I acted, for the version of myself that showed up. Like, I know that I did wrong here. And he's actually like beating himself up quite a bit right? And we see him talking to other characters in the show. A lot of the characters are therapists, so they have this type of dialogue. And we see him constantly being like, I can't believe I did that. Why was I that type of father? And he kind of gets stuck in this cycle of beating himself up and not really like doing too much about it. He is trying to show up as a perfect father, to engage with her, to do things with her, but he has to repair, what happened here. And so later on in the series, we see him really commit to being a better father, and he takes ownership of the way that he acted. Now, it would have been really easy for this guy to say, I lost my wife. I went through one of the hardest things that anyone could ever go through. I was left to parent this child on my own, a teenage girl. That was really difficult for me as a father. Like, there are a million excuses that Jimmy could have made here for why he wasn't showing up well with his daughter. But instead, he decides to connect with her and to bond with her and to make amends and to try to be better. And he acknowledges all the things that he did. And he knows that his daughter knows how hard this was for both of them. And it's very obvious that Alice has an immense amount of empathy and understanding for her father. And I believe that Jimmy's ability to recognize his behavior, apologize to his daughter, and start showing up differently in their relationship is really going to be the key moment in both of their lives that completely changes how this relationship functions from here on out. And you can see that his daughter feels more connected to him, like she can rely on him, and the balance in the relationship has been restored, that he is the father and she is the child, and he is there to help her and to care for her and to be there for her. And she is in the childlike role again. And a scene where I think this is really obvious is where Alice is at a party. I believe this is in the season finale or like the episode before. And she calls her dad and she just wants to see him and share how she's feeling with him. And he picks her up and they ride in the car and, they have a conversation and he listens to her and then he drops her back off at the party and he drives by, again and sees her and they kind of share this look between one another that's like, I understand you, I get you, I'm here for you. And it's really, really powerful to like see that transition from her not being able to connect with her father, from her seeing how he's going through his grief and that she really has to take care of herself and find somebody else to be like a pseudo parent for her during that time. And when she notices that her dad realizes that he was absent, he didn't show up, he could have done better, and he's committing to doing better, she's able to forgive him for that and to say, you were going through a hard time. And I see that you also realize that you were still supposed to be my parent during that time. And I also lost my mom and it was very hard for me. All right, now let's talk about Paul and his daughter, Meg. So Paul is played by Harrison Ford in the show, and Paul is definitely very emotionally guarded. He can come across as loving and warm and kind, but also very walled off. You can tell that he is there for his patients and he's an excellent therapist, but he doesn't share a lot with the people in his life. He doesn't get like super vulnerable with them. And everyone is always kind of trying to like get more from him, get him out of his shell, get him to connect a little bit more. And Paul has an adult daughter. She's married and I think she has a child. She expresses that she feels like her dad always put his patients above her. So let's break down how this might feel, right? You have a parent who is a therapist, who has the at least cognitive understanding about what children need from their parents and the type of emotional closeness that they need. And that they have the capacity to give that to other people. They are sitting down with strangers and having these moments with them regularly. That's their career. So when you know that about your parent and you're not getting that from them, that doesn't feel good. A child in that situation might start to feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get that from them? And it's understandable why they would feel that way. But the other piece of this is that Paul clearly struggles with vulnerability. And he is likely going to feel most vulnerable in his relationship with his daughter. And especially because his daughter tends to call him out on this behavior and she can see him. And so he has instead decided to like totally pull away. And he describes that their relationship has been estranged at times and they have not had any type of connection. And it seems that for many years, Paul, the father, would wall himself off and would rather choose estrangement or distance or isolation over emotional vulnerability because that feels scary. And you can be a therapist and never get vulnerable. It's actually like the best way to engage in this type of material is that you can know about it, think that it's important, but never actually have to risk that yourself. And that's something that his daughter has to kind of realize is that her father's inability to do this with her had nothing to do with her. And it wasn't because he liked his patients more or they were more important to him. It's that those relationships felt a lot safer and a lot easier. And he was able to just kind of pull away and immerse himself in that. And throughout the series, we see Paul and Meg reconnect and kind of go through a couple of moments where they slip in to old patterns. There's one situation that I'm thinking of where he invites her to come out to a city where he is getting an award, and it's an award for work. And initially, when he invites his daughter and her family to come, he doesn't specify that it's for work. Then he says it's for work when she's like, maybe we can go another time. He's telling her very last minute and not really considering how difficult it would be for her to make all of those plans at this stage in her life. And she gets triggered and is like, oh, of course it's for work. And they kind of have this moment that's very like reminiscent of the past. And I think what's so important here is that when they both get that like triggering of, I feel vulnerable, I feel like you're going to reject me or like I'm not as important to you, they both decide to push past that feeling because the other person is genuinely showing that they're trying to do that. So there is some level of safety that's been established here, right? I feel like you actually do want to connect with me, but this is triggering me. I'm going to pull back, reorient myself to this problem and see what can happen next. And they have like a big reconciliation. And later on in the show, you see the two of them spending time together and enjoying being in one place and really having like that family bond, that time with other generations that they both actually want, but they had to put down their shields in order to get there. And after this, Paul gets diagnosed with Parkinson's, I believe, if I remember correctly. And this is another moment where he does not want to tell his daughter. He does not want to be emotionally vulnerable or to connect with her in that way over this. And him sharing this with her leads to her wanting to help him and jump in and be there for him. They're trying to like work out the kinks in this adult relationship where it's like, I am the daughter and now I am taking care of you and I am the parent and I'm trying to let you take care of me, but I don't want to move out of this role of being the cold, in control father who's got it all together. And I think watching them move through that is really fascinating and really relatable. And I think their biggest challenge moving forward is going to be learning how to hold all those things at once. Like, I want to care for you, but I don't want to get hurt. I want to let you care for me, but I feel very vulnerable and it feels very scary. And if they can both juggle that and find a way to be open with one another as they hit these bumps in the road, I think that this relationship can be really great moving forward. All right, so now let's talk about Sean and Tim. This is the relationship in the show that really jumped out to me the most as being one of the most challenging adult child and parent relationships. So for those of you that have seen the show, we have the character Sean, who has come back from serving in the military. He's dealing with PTSD and he is seeing one of the therapists at the practice in the show. And as he is working through some of his triggers and moving past using violence as his coping mechanism, he starts to uncover that he needs some recognition from his father about what he's been through. And he needs to connect with his father. And he especially needs his father to understand that the way that he showed up when he came back from serving did not help him and was hurtful to him. And he felt like his father really wasn't there for him. And prior to this therapy, Sean is engaging in a lot of violence, and his parent has another child who is younger, and they say, Sean, you can't live in the home with us because we feel like you're a danger to this younger child, and we're going to have to ask you to leave. And Sean is kind of feeling like, I'm sick. I am dealing with a lot. I have, at this time, he doesn't know he has PTSD, but that's what's going on with him. And you, as my parent, are kind of rejecting me and saying, I'm going to put this child's needs over yours, and you need to go fix this on your own. And I think a lot of parents are put in that place, having that impossible decision that they have to make, all the time. It's like, do I have to prioritize one child's safety over the other? Who has more access to resources? Who's older? Who's more impressionable right now? And, I don't think we can fault Sean's parents for making the decision that they made. And we can also have deep empathy for what that must have felt like for Sean, even as an adult, to be treated that way by his father. But there is this pivotal scene that really is so emotional to watch in the show, where you have Sean and his father standing inside of a food truck that Sean is running. And Sean is, you can clearly tell he's feeling quite confident and inspired from therapy, right? And the therapist has kind of helped him explore his emotions and learn how to talk about them. And he's feeling like ready to have this big moment. And the problem is that his dad is not there. And so Sean shares how he's feeling with his father, and you can feel the hope in what he's saying. And this is a moment that I've talked about with so many of our members at Calling Home, and so many clients that I've worked with as a therapist, is like, I said everything I wanted to say, and it was not met in the way that I wanted it to be met. And so you hear Sean say all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm cheering for him. Like, this was so good. You did a great job. And his dad, there's a long pause that you can just feel like the tension in the air of like, what way is this going to go? And the father, like many parents, unfortunately, says, basically, like, what are you talking about? This is the therapist's fault. They've put this into your head, and like, they want you to hate me, basically. And Sean immediately, he's so vulnerable in this moment. He feels terrible after this reaction from his dad. And he is just pushed back like 20 steps in his journey. And that evening, he ends up, going and putting himself in a situation where there is going to be violence so that he can get hurt. The viewer has this realization that like, Sean's got to fix this with his dad before he can totally move forward. Like, all the coping skills in the world aren't really going to fix this until he not necessarily reconciles it with his dad, and his dad understands. That would be wonderful, but he at least accepts it for himself and realizes, what's going on here between him and his dad. A couple of things I want to point out here in this relationship, because I think it's so important, is that you can really see the generational differences here between like emotional expression and attitudes about therapy. That's like really on full display on how that can hold parents back. This is one of the parents in the show who is not in this therapist role, who is looking at this from the outside and saying, my son is having all these problems. He needs to fix them. He needs to get better. He went to therapy, and now I'm being told that I'm actually the problem. When we all know that Sean's not saying that his dad is the only problem or that he's responsible for everything here. He's saying, Dad, I really needed you when I got back from being in the military and I experienced all this stuff. And I really need someone to be there for me and to support me. And I would love for you to be that person. I'm telling you how I feel. And his father is interpreting this as, you think this is my fault. You're blaming me. I'm going to get really defensive, and I am going to like armor up and protect myself from what you're saying. And I think many of you have been in situations where you have experienced something like that from a parent or a family member, and it is extremely difficult. All right, so now let's talk about the fourth adult child and parent dynamic in this show, and that is Gabby, the therapist, and her mother. So This one is so interesting, and I think people probably had a lot of different reactions to this and a lot of different perspectives. So let's talk about what's going on between Gabby and her mom. Gabby's mother is getting older, having some health issues. She's been living with Gabby's sister. It seems like for a while. I'm not sure exactly how long. And Gabby is starting to notice that there's some strain on her sister. Her sister is being held back from really pursuing what she wants to pursue in life. And Gabby's also noticing that this is causing some issues in their relationship. And there's kind of a lot of this like unspoken tension between Gabby and her sister. And eventually Gabby's like tells her sister, I am going to step in and I'm going to help mom. And you can go and live your life. And I want you to do what you want to do. And I need you to give me this many months to do it. And so Gabby's sister agrees and she starts making plans for her own life and she's really excited about it. But in all of this, Gabby starts to realize that she does not want her mother to move in with her. And throughout these couple of episodes, we watch Gabby navigate such a common experience for adults who have parents who are sick, dying, dealing with disability of like, how do I let this line up with the stage of life that I'm in? And so for context, Gabby is not married. She does not have children. She's dating. She's just kind of moved into her own home. She's one of the younger people on the show, a younger therapist. And she is not ready to take on this responsibility, but you can tell that she feels obligated to. I think her gender, her culture, her race, how her family has handled things, all of this is playing into why she feels the way that she feels. And she has a couple of conversations with her other therapist coworkers about this. And Paul particularly tells her, like, it seems like you really don't want your mom to live with you, but you never tell anybody, you know, what you want. You're always giving and doing for others. And like, maybe this needs to be the time that you say it. And of course, Gabby like doesn't do that. She keeps pushing through mainly because her mother comes to her house and is like, all right, where's my bedroom? Where am I going to stay? And she just assumes that she's going to be living with her daughter. And as Gabby is packing up the house with her mother, she says to her, like, Mom, I don't think this is a good idea for you to live with me. I don't think it's going to be good for our relationship. And so I want to pause here because I think there are so many different reactions that you can have to this, right? And Gabby's thing is basically like, I am still going to take care of you. I am going to mimic the situation that you have now, right? I'm going to put you in a home. I'm going to pay for care. I'm going to make sure that you have someone to take care of you and I'm going to come and visit you. I am going to care for you within the confines of what I have available to me. And I know that there are some people that will hear what I'm saying and hear what this person did and say, that's terrible. How could you do that to your mother? How could you not let them move in with you? And I get why some of you would feel that way. And I think we all have our own like cultural expectations and beliefs about that. And the other alternative that I want to offer you is kind of what Gabby is saying to herself here, that I think this is going to ruin our relationship. And so there could be a world where she has her mother move in with her and their relationship goes downhill rapidly and it becomes contentious, it becomes critical. Gabby doesn't want to be in her own home. She feels uncomfortable. Her mother feels uncomfortable. They don't like each other and they're kind of like ships passing in the night and not really spending time with one another. And we could compare that to a situation where maybe Gabby goes and has dinner with her mom twice a week. They enjoy each other. She has care for her. She stops by. She checks in with her. They're able to laugh together, have fun, enjoy one another, and maintain a good relationship dynamic. And I think when you hear those two options, for some people, those are the two options. And for others, there are layers in between. Some of you might still say, nope, it is wrong to not have your parent move in with you, at this stage in their life. And others will say, you know what, I don't want my relationship with my parent to get that way, or I'm fearful of how this is going to impact my relationship with my partner, with my children, how it's going to affect my job. These are all things that you are allowed to consider, that we are often told that we're not allowed to consider when these moments arise. And what you've been told your whole life to do isn't always the best option for you today. It could have been the best option for your parents and your grandparents 30, 40, 50 years ago because there were less options. It is okay to step back and say, how do I want to do this for my unique life circumstances? Given my health, my age, what I have going on in my life, how my relationship is with my parent, and then go from there. But there's a really interesting scene here that happens after this. Gabby's mother gets very upset with Gabby when she tells her that this isn't going to be good for our relationship and basically says, you know what? Okay, then leave me alone. I'm on my own. I don't want to talk to you. And Gabby has to deal with the fact that her mother is punishing her with the silent treatment as a result of the emotions that she is feeling about this. And her mother is, probably feeling a lot of her own feelings, feeling abandoned, isolated, alone, feeling scared about the end of her life, all of these things that are valid in the same way that Gabby is feeling burdened and suffocated and overwhelmed. And she's trying to protect her life and her future as well. And their needs are so at odds that you have to find a way to compromise and try to get each other's needs met in the best way possible. And when Gabby is going through this and, she's finding someone to help with her mother, I think it's like a nurse that's at the house or something. There's someone that Gabby's interacting with at the end of the season that I cannot remember what her role is, but she makes these comments of oh, only horrible people put their parents into a home. I would never do that. That's terrible. She's like, that's the wrong thing to do. And is saying all of this to Gabby while Gabby's deeply struggling with this. The way that they did this in the show is so impactful because the woman that's saying this is visually of a similar background to Gabby. So they're both of the same race. They look quite around the same age, that it's possible that Gabby would look at this girl and be like, wow, I should feel exactly how this person feels. And I don't. And that makes me bad and wrong and a problem. But the beauty of this is that around Thanksgiving, a little bit later in the show, after Gabby's mom had said she will not be coming to Thanksgiving at Gabby's house, her mom ends up showing up. And there's not too much that is said between them in this moment, but it does seem like it's an olive branch and a way of saying, I still want to be in your life, even if it isn't under the exact conditions that I thought it would be at this time in our lives, and that I want to find a way to make this relationship work. And you can see how much Gabby wants to take care of her mother and wants this relationship with her mother and wants to be close to her. She just needs to do it in a different way. And so this is where we need to all be a little bit more just curious and dynamic in our thinking of just because someone doesn't take in their family in the exact way that you think that they should doesn't mean that they don't care and that they don't love their family and that they don't want to do what's best for them, but that maybe they're trying to do it in a way that actually can be sustainable and keep the relationship alive and allow them to enjoy each other and not be at each other's throats through the end of the relationship. All right, the last parent-child dynamic in the show that I want to talk about is Liz and Derek. So Liz is a mother of 3 boys. She is now an empty nester. Her youngest has recently gone to college, and she was a stay-at-home mother with these 3 kids for the duration of their lives. And Liz is really going through it. She appears very happy and productive and connected in a lot of ways, and she has a social circle, but she is struggling, and she's letting people know this in kind of these more subtle ways. She does come out and say it more directly to her spouse, who is kind and loving and present and engaged, but is very oblivious to the ways that his wife is struggling at certain moments throughout this season. And I appreciated that because I think it was a really good, like, nuanced take on how you can be an attentive, kind, loving spouse and still miss things, still not be aware of the ways that your partner is like going through it, and the need for checking in and looking below the surface of like certain behavior is very important. But there is a lot going on between Liz and her sons, and there's a particular moment that I can think of with the youngest one where he is really emotional about a breakup, and he's struggling and he's kind of, flailing in his emotions a little bit. And Liz has this moment where she's basically like, get over it. You got to like buck up and move on. And you can tell there's this battle going on between the two of them where it's like she wants her son to be more independent, but she also wants him to need her. And he wants to be more independent, but he also is like really needing his mom. And he kind of needs this push out of the nest, I think. But after she does that, he packs up his stuff and he goes back to school without much. I don't even think he said goodbye to her. And this really hurts her. And she's like, wow, he just left. But this is also a moment I think that needed to happen in their relationship, right? Where Liz could see that her kids can stand on their own. Her kids could believe that about themselves. And she also has to go through the transition of no longer being a full-time mother in that way to her children in the way that she was when they were small and they needed her in different ways. And so that's super powerful. And then there's this scene later on in the show where Liz does end up kissing another man that is an ex from her past, and her husband finds out, and they're kind of going through their own stuff. And the husband realizes, like, wow, my wife is kind of going through it, and this is a result of that, and she needs something. And he has her three sons come back, and they're all like sitting at the table together, and you can tell that it's this moment where her kids are like offering her support in adulthood. They don't know what's going on, but it was probably a situation where the dad was like, your mom could really use a moment to see you guys. And they all show up for her, and you can feel this support of her seeing like, wow, I did a good job. Like, look, here is my work, what I have to show for life. My kids are supporting me in my time of need after I was there for them. And there's a lot of times in the show where she talks about how she kind of off the cuff in a funny way, like gave everything to her kids. And I think she realized in this moment that like she was connected to her children and they did want to be there for her, and she didn't have to emotionally dump on them or make them responsible for her emotions or her problems to still like be in their support and be connected to them. So I thought that was a really cool moment, and I think that it will help anyone like Liz see that even after your children leave and you're in this process of reorienting your relationship and transforming it, that you can work through these difficult moments of being like, okay, my kids don't need me as much anymore. And that's a good thing. That means that I did my job, that I raised them, and that I did what I was supposed to do. And ultimately, this is an ideal outcome. And how can my spouse and I learn to support each other and to be there for one another so that we don't make our children responsible for our emotional needs and for supporting us 100%. All right, so let's recap a little bit here. If you want to go back and watch the show or kind of think about how these relationships apply to your life, I think Jimmy and Alice are the best redemption arc example early on in their relationship in this show. It's a great example about how we can unknowingly and not on purpose inflict damage on our children, and how to be accountable and show up in the moments that it matters, and that repair can always happen. And the sooner you repair, the better. As a parent, if you can get out of your own way and accept that you can do harm and you will do harm, and that you can apologize and take accountability, things can get better. And then I think Paul and Meg are such a great example about the transitions that happen in our relationships that can be very difficult. They're a great example about emotional vulnerability and emotional connection between parents and children, and also how work can interfere in our relationships with our children, even in adulthood. It's also another great redemption story about how it's never too late to apologize, change your behavior, reconnect, and try to be vulnerable and connected with your children in adulthood. In a very similar way to Gabby and her mother, Paul and his daughter show how challenging it can be sometimes for a parent to be vulnerable with their child as they become older and get more towards the end of their life. I think Sean and his father are one of the best examples of how parental dismissiveness can shut down the relationship and make it very difficult to heal. And also, Sean's father is a great example of someone who was highly dismissive, highly walled off, who said, you know what, I'm going to push past this and I'm going to try to connect with my child. And we see him kind of trip and stumble and fail at that several times throughout the season, but he comes around and they both try to give each other the space and openness to do that, which is really beautiful and really powerful. Gabby and her mother are a great example of adults and parents navigating life transitions, setting boundaries, making room for one another needs, and trying to redefine your relationship as your needs and your life and your capacity changes. I think Gabby is also a great example of how these relationships can impact sibling dynamics in adulthood, and then also impact parent adult child relationships because of how those sibling dynamics are showing up. And then Liz and her sons and her husband, Derek, I think this is a great example of, again, transitioning into a new role as a parent with your children, and your children transitioning into a different relationship with you, and how that can evoke a ton of feelings and changes in the parent that they want to make sure they do not make about their child or put on their child, and how we have to be really aware of how this life change is impacting us, so that we don't then mess up the other relationships in our life, whether that's our relationship with our spouse or with our children. So, which parent-child relationship resonated most with you from Shrinking Season 2? I'd love to hear about that in the comments. If you liked this video, please do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. This is one of my first longer form videos like this for YouTube, and I really want to do more analysis of TV shows that are about family dynamics. So I would love to do that for you all if it's something that you're interested in and that you like. And the best way to show me that is by subscribing to my channel, liking this video, sharing it, and letting me know in the comments. If you would like more information like this, if you're somebody that is working on your adult family relationships and trying to find other people just like you, we would love to have you at Calling Home in the Family Cycle Breakers Club.